The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered building that served as Ordway's general store, and Jennifer Collins pressed one trembling hand against her swollen belly as dust billowed through the open window, coating her already travel-worn dress in another layer of Colorado grit. She had been on the road for 3 weeks, crossing from Philadelphia to this remote cattle town nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, and every mile had been a prayer that she would not be turned away when the truth became impossible to hide. The letter she clutched in her other hand had grown soft from repeated reading, the ink slightly smeared where anxious tears had fallen during the darkest nights of her journey. Mr. Michael Ellis had written to her with such kindness, such genuine warmth, that she had allowed herself to hope that perhaps her deception would not matter, that perhaps he would understand when she explained everything. But now, stepping down from the coach with the driver's assistance, feeling the solid ground of Ordway beneath her feet for the first time, Jennifer felt the full weight of what she had done. The advertisement she had answered had been clear. Rancher seeking wife, it had said. Good home, honest work, faithful partnership. There had been no mention of accepting another man's child, no indication that complications would be welcomed. She had written back anyway, desperate and alone, her belly just beginning to show, and she had told herself that she would explain everything when she arrived, that honesty would prevail once they met face to face. You the mail-order bride? A woman's voice asked, and Jennifer turned to find an older lady with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes examining her with undisguised curiosity. Yes, madam, Jennifer Collins. I am here to meet Mr. Michael Ellis. The woman's gaze dropped immediately to Jennifer's midsection, where 4 months of pregnancy were becoming increasingly difficult to conceal beneath her traveling cloak, despite the oppressive July heat. The silence that followed felt like judgment personified, and Jennifer's cheeks burned with shame. He is expecting me, Jennifer said softly, though her voice wavered. We have been corresponding for 2 months. I know who you are, the woman replied, though her tone had softened somewhat. Michael sent word to watch for the coach. I am Mrs. Patterson. My husband runs the general store. Michael's ranch is about 5 miles west of town. He should be here shortly. He had business with the bank this morning. Jennifer nodded, relieved to have a few more minutes to compose herself, to prepare the words she would use to explain her situation. She moved to the shade of the store's overhang, grateful to be out of the relentless sun, and waited with her single trunk at her feet. Around her, Ordway bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys drove cattle down the main street, heading toward the stockyards. Women in bonnets hurried between shops. A blacksmith's hammer rang out in steady rhythm from somewhere nearby. It was 1882, and the West was still raw and untamed, but civilization was taking root in towns like this, carving order out of wilderness. She had been waiting perhaps 15 minutes when she heard the sound of a horse approaching at a measured pace. Jennifer looked up and felt her breath catch. The man who dismounted from the sorrel gelding was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore dusty work clothes, a leather vest over a blue shirt, and boots that had seen hard use. Everything about him spoke of strength and capability, from the easy way he moved to the weathered tan of his skin. This was a man who worked his land with his own hands, who knew every corner of his property, who could handle whatever challenges the frontier threw at him. Michael Ellis removed his hat as he approached, and Jennifer saw kindness in his face, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his powerful build. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a year or two more, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite the hardships of ranching life. "Miss Collins," he asked, and his voice was deep and warm, exactly as she had imagined from his letters. "Yes," she managed, rising to her feet. "Mr. Ellis, it is good to finally meet you." He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face, making him almost boyishly handsome. "The pleasure is all mine, madam. Your letters have been the brightest part of my days these past weeks. Welcome to Ordway." His gaze traveled over her face with evident appreciation, taking in her green eyes and auburn hair, the delicate features that had once drawn so many admiring glances back east before everything had fallen apart. Then his eyes dropped, just as Mrs. Patterson's had, and Jennifer watched the smile fade as understanding dawned. The silence stretched between them, heavy and terrible. Jennifer's hands moved instinctively to cradle her belly, a protective gesture she could not suppress. "Mr. Ellis, I can explain," she began, her voice breaking. "Please, let me explain." Michael's expression had gone carefully neutral, his eyes unreadable. He glanced around, clearly aware that they were drawing attention from passers-by, and then nodded toward his horse. "We should talk at the ranch. Let me load your trunk." The ride to the Ellis Ranch was conducted in silence. Jennifer perched on the wagon seat beside Michael while he drove the team with steady competence. She wanted to speak, to break the terrible quiet, but fear had closed her throat. She had gambled everything on this chance, had spent the last of her money on the journey west, and now she was about to lose it all because of her deception. She had nowhere to go, no family to return to, nothing but the clothes in her trunk and a pregnancy that grew more obvious by the day. The ranch, when it came into view, was more substantial than she had expected. A two-story house with a wide porch stood surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings. Corrals held dozens of cattle, and she could see horses grazing in a distant pasture. This was a successful operation, built through years of hard work, and Michael Ellis was clearly a man of means by frontier standards. The sight made her impending rejection all the more painful. Michael helped her down from the wagon, his hands gentle despite the tension in his jaw, and gestured toward the house. "Please, go inside. I will bring your trunk in a moment." The interior was clean and surprisingly homey, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture that looked handmade. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and Jennifer could see a kitchen through an open doorway, well equipped with a cast iron stove and copper pots hanging from hooks. This was a home that needed a woman's touch, a place where a family could grow and thrive. It was everything she had dreamed of during the long, frightening months since she had discovered her condition. Michael entered carrying her trunk as though it weighed nothing and set it down near the door. Then he removed his hat again, running one hand through his hair, and finally looked at her directly. "You should sit down," he said quietly. "You have had a long journey." Jennifer sank into one of the wooden chairs near the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Michael pulled another chair around to face her and sat, his forearms resting on his knees, his hat dangling from his fingers. For a long moment he simply looked at her, and she could see him wrestling with his thoughts. "How far along?" he asked finally, his voice carefully controlled. "4 months," Jennifer whispered. "I know I should have told you in my letters. I know I deceived you, and I am so terribly sorry. I had nowhere else to turn, Mr. Ellis. My parents died 2 years ago, first my mother of pneumonia and then my father of grief, I think. I have no siblings, no other family. The man who did this to me promised marriage, but when I told him about the baby, he disappeared, left Philadelphia entirely. I lost my position because of my condition, lost my boarding house room. I had nothing left, no options. And then I saw your advertisement, and I thought perhaps God was giving me one last chance." The words poured out of her in a rush, all the fear and desperation of the past month spilling forth. "I am a good woman, Mr. Ellis. I made one terrible mistake, trusted the wrong man, but I can work hard. I can cook and clean and help with the ranch. I will not be a burden to you. Please do not send me away. I will do anything, work in any capacity. You do not have to marry me. I can be a housekeeper, anything at all. Just please do not make me go back east with nowhere to go." Tears were streaming down her face now, though she tried desperately to hold them back. She had promised herself she would not cry, would not resort to feminine tears to manipulate sympathy, but the fear was too great, the stakes too high. Michael was quiet for a long time, his gaze moving from her face to her belly and back again. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between disappointment and compassion. Finally, he rose and walked to the window, staring out at his land, his shoulders tense. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said, his voice rough with old pain. "Childbirth. The baby did not survive either. We had been married 5 years, tried for children the whole time, and when it finally happened, I lost them both in a single night." He turned back to face her, and Jennifer saw grief etched deep in his features. "This ranch has felt empty ever since. Too quiet, too lonely. I put that advertisement in the papers because I was tired of living with ghosts, tired of eating cold suppers alone and waking up to silence. I wanted a partner, someone to build a life with, maybe try again for a family if God willed it." He moved back to his chair and sat down heavily. "What you have done, coming here without telling me the truth, that is a hard thing to overlook, Miss Collins. Trust is important in a marriage, and you have started us off with a lie." "I know," Jennifer said miserably. "I know, and I am so sorry. I was desperate and afraid, but that does not excuse it. You deserved honesty." Michael nodded slowly, then said something she had not expected. "But I also know something about being desperate and afraid. After my wife died, I was half mad with grief. Did things I am not proud of, pushed away everyone who tried to help. It took me a long time to find my way back to being a decent man again." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me true, Miss Collins. The father of that baby, did he force you, or did you go with him willingly?" Jennifer felt her cheeks burn, but she met his gaze steadily. "I went willingly. He courted me properly for months, spoke of marriage, of building a life together. I believed him. I thought he loved me. When I gave myself to him, I believed we would be married within weeks. I was wrong about his character, but I made the choice myself. I will not claim otherwise." Something in Michael's expression softened at her honesty. He was quiet again, thinking, and Jennifer held her breath, waiting for the verdict that would determine the course of her entire future. "This child," Michael said slowly, "will need a father, a name, protection. The frontier is not kind to those without family." "I know," Jennifer whispered. Michael stood and walked to the fireplace, bracing one hand against the mantel. When he spoke again, his voice was firm, decided. "Then we will marry as planned. Tomorrow, if you are willing. The child will have my name, and anyone who asks will be told it is mine. No one needs to know otherwise. This baby will be born in Ellis, and it will be raised as my own." Jennifer stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Ellis, you cannot mean that. You do not owe me anything. The baby is not yours." He turned to face her, and there was a fierceness in his expression that took her breath away. "If I say it is mine, then it is mine. No child deserves to be born without a father's protection, without a name and a home. You made a mistake, Miss Collins, but the baby is innocent. And I meant what I said in my letters. I want a family. I want children in this house again. If God is giving me a chance to be a father sooner than expected, well, I am not going to turn that away." "But everyone will know," Jennifer protested weakly, her mind reeling. They will count the months and realize the timing is wrong. A ghost of a smile touched Michael's lips. Let them whisper. I have thick skin and gossip fades. By the time the baby is a year old, no one will remember or care. We will tell people we met when I was in Denver on business 6 months ago, that we corresponded after that, and that you came to marry me. Close enough to the truth that it will pass. Jennifer rose on shaking legs, hardly daring to hope. Why would you do this? You do not know me. The baby is not yours. Why would you take on such a burden? Michael crossed the room and stood before her, looking down into her eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. Because I know what it is to lose everything. Because I believe people deserve second chances. Because that baby needs a father and I need a family. And because when I read your letters, Miss Collins, I heard intelligence and kindness and humor. I heard someone I thought I could build a life with. That has not changed just because circumstances are more complicated than I expected. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I am not saying this will be easy. We have started backwards with deception instead of trust, but we can work towards something good if we are both willing to try. I will treat you with respect and care, and I will raise this child as my own, with all the love a father should have. In return, I ask only that you are honest with me from this point forward, that you work beside me to build this ranch and this family, and that you give us a real chance. Jennifer could not speak past the lump in her throat. This man, this stranger, was offering her more grace and mercy than she had any right to expect. He was offering her child a future, offering her a home and a partnership when she deserved to be turned away in disgrace. I will be the best wife I can be, she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. I promise you, Mr. Ellis, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of this kindness. Michael, he corrected gently. If we are going to be married, you should call me Michael. And I will call you Jennifer if that is acceptable. Yes, she said, unable to stop the tears that flowed freely now, tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. Yes, that is more than acceptable. Michael smiled then, that same warm smile that had greeted her in town, and Jennifer felt something shift in her chest. This was not the romantic love she had once dreamed of, not the passionate courtship she had imagined in her girlhood. This was something different, built on desperation and mercy and practical necessity. But looking into Michael's kind eyes, seeing the sincerity in his face, she thought perhaps it could become something more, given time and effort. You should rest, Michael said, stepping back to a more proper distance. I will show you to your room. We can talk more over supper, make plans for tomorrow. He carried her trunk upstairs to a small bedroom that was clean and simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. This was going to be the nursery, he said quietly, setting the trunk down. My wife had started fixing it up before she died. After, I could not bear to look at it, so I kept the door closed. But I cleaned it out last week after I got your last letter. Thought it could be yours until after the wedding. He gestured toward a door across the hall. My room is there. The necessary is out back, and there is a pump for water in the kitchen. Thank you, Jennifer said softly, for everything. Michael nodded, his expression unreadable, and left her alone. Jennifer sank onto the bed, her legs finally giving out, and let herself cry in earnest, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the future she had lost, for the innocence she could never reclaim, for the fear she had carried for so long. But she also cried with relief, with gratitude, with tentative hope that perhaps this strange twist of fate might lead somewhere better than she had dared imagine. When she finally composed herself, Jennifer washed her face in the basin and changed out of her travel-stained dress into something cleaner. Then she ventured downstairs, determined to make herself useful. She found Michael in the kitchen, looking perplexed at a collection of ingredients spread across the table. "I was planning to make supper," he admitted with a sheepish grin, "but I am not much of a cook. I can manage coffee and bacon, maybe beans, but that is about the extent of my culinary skills." Jennifer felt herself smile for the first time in what felt like years. "Let me help. It is the least I can do." They worked together in the kitchen, Jennifer taking charge while Michael followed her instructions. She made a simple meal of fried chicken, biscuits, and greens from the garden she had spotted behind the house, pleased to find the pantry well stocked with basic supplies. As they cooked, they talked, slowly finding their way toward the easy conversation they had established in their letters. Jennifer learned that Michael had come to Colorado 5 years earlier, buying the ranch with money he had saved working cattle drives in Texas. He had built the house himself with help from neighbors, gradually expanding his herd until he had one of the more successful operations in the area. His wife had been the daughter of another rancher, a marriage that had been part business arrangement and part genuine affection. "I cared for her deeply," Michael said as they sat down to eat, "but I cannot say it was a great romantic love. We were companions, partners. We worked well together. I think we would have had a good life if she had lived." Jennifer appreciated his honesty. "My parents had that kind of marriage. They respected each other, worked together, raised me in a loving home. It was not grand passion, but it was solid and real. I always thought that was more valuable than romantic feelings that might fade." "And the man who got you in trouble?" Michael asked carefully. "Did you love him?" Jennifer considered the question, taking a bite of chicken to give herself time to think. "I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of him more than the reality. He was handsome and charming, said all the right things. I was lonely after my parents died, vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. Real love would not have disappeared at the first sign of difficulty. Real love would have stayed." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That is a wise observation. Love is not just pretty words and romantic gestures. It is staying through hardship, working through problems, choosing your partner even when things are difficult." They finished the meal in companionable silence, and then Michael insisted on helping with the dishes, working beside her to clean up the kitchen. Jennifer found herself relaxing in his presence, appreciating his quiet competence and gentle manner. He did not treat her with judgment or disdain despite her condition. Instead, he was courteous and kind, giving her space but also making her feel welcome in his home. As darkness fell, they sat on the porch for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to its pack. The air was cool and clear, the stars brighter than Jennifer had ever seen them in Philadelphia. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "So different from the city." "It can be hard too," Michael warned. "Winters are brutal. Summers are dry. The work is constant and there are always problems to solve. Cattle get sick, fences break, storms cause damage. It is not an easy life." "I am not afraid of hard work," Jennifer replied. "And I would rather face difficulties in a place like this, with beauty all around, than struggle in a city where no one cares if you live or die." Michael glanced at her, and she saw approval in his expression. "We will do fine then," he said quietly. "I think you have more backbone than you give yourself credit for, Jennifer Collins." They sat together until the chill drove them inside, and then Michael banked the fire while Jennifer locked the doors. At the foot of the stairs, they paused, suddenly awkward. "I will see you in the morning," Michael said. "Sleep well." "You too," Jennifer replied, and then climbed the stairs to her room, aware of him watching her go. She lay awake for a long time that night, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the tiny flutter of life within. "We are going to be all right," she whispered to her unborn child. "We have found a good man, a safe place. We are going to be all right." Morning came bright and clear, and Jennifer woke to find Michael already up and working. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, where she found coffee already brewed and bacon frying on the stove. Michael looked up when she entered, his hair still damp from washing. "Good morning," he said, and his smile was warm and genuine. "I thought I would start breakfast, but I did not want to wake you. You needed rest." "Good morning," Jennifer replied, moving to take over the cooking. "What time do you want to go into town?" "I was thinking mid-morning. We can meet with Reverend Thompson at the church, have a simple ceremony. Mrs. Patterson and her husband can serve as witnesses if you have no objection." "That sounds perfect," Jennifer said, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. This time yesterday she had been on a stagecoach, terrified of her uncertain future. Now she was about to marry a man she had known for less than 24 hours, a man who was claiming her child as his own out of pure goodness. They ate breakfast together, and then Jennifer returned to her room to prepare for her wedding. She had brought one good dress, a simple gown of deep blue that she had altered as much as possible to accommodate her changing figure. It was not a traditional white wedding dress, but it was the best she had. She arranged her auburn hair carefully, pinning it up and allowing a few curls to frame her face. Looking at herself in the small mirror above the dresser, she saw a woman who looked older than her 22 years, marked by hardship but not broken by it. When she came downstairs, she found Michael waiting in clean clothes, his hair neatly combed, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "I picked these this morning," he said, offering them to her. "Thought you should have some flowers for your wedding day." The simple gesture touched her deeply, and Jennifer felt tears prick her eyes again. "Thank you, Michael. They are beautiful." The ride into Ordway was quieter than the previous day's journey, but it was a different kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, but rather contemplative, both of them thinking about the commitment they were about to make. When they arrived at the church, a simple white building with a tall steeple, Reverend Thompson was waiting along with the Pattersons. The Reverend was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He did not ask questions about Jennifer's condition, though she saw him glance at her midsection briefly. If he had concerns, he kept them to himself, focusing instead on the ceremony. "Marriage is a sacred commitment," he said, looking between Jennifer and Michael as they stood before the altar. "It is a promise to stand together through whatever life brings, to support and care for one another, to build a family founded on respect and love. Michael Ellis, you take Jennifer Collins to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live." "I do," Michael said firmly, his voice steady and sure. "Jennifer Collins, you take Michael Ellis to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live." Jennifer looked into Michael's eyes, seeing steadiness and strength there, and made her own vow with complete sincerity. "I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss your bride." Michael leaned down, his hands gently framing Jennifer's face, and pressed a soft, chaste kiss to her lips. It was her first kiss from him, and though it was brief and proper, Jennifer felt warmth spread through her chest. This was real now. She was married. Her child would have a name, she had a home and a partner. The Pattersons congratulated them warmly, and Mrs. Patterson pressed a basket into Jennifer's hands. I put together a little wedding supper for you, she said, her earlier judgmental attitude apparently softened by the marriage. There is cold chicken, fresh bread, and a pie. You deserve something special for your wedding night. Thank you so much, Jennifer said gratefully. That is very kind. They signed the marriage certificate, making everything legal and official, and then Michael helped Jennifer back into the wagon. The ride back to the ranch felt different now. She was no longer Jennifer Collins, alone and desperate. She was Jennifer Ellis, wife to a good man, soon to be mother to a child who would have every advantage she could provide. That evening, they ate Mrs. Patterson's excellent supper by lamplight, talking more freely than they had yet. Jennifer told Michael about her childhood in Philadelphia, her work as a teacher before her parents died, her love of reading and music. Michael told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about the adventures of his cattle driving years, about his dreams for the ranch. I want to expand the herd, he said, his eyes bright with ambition. Maybe bring in some better breeding stock, improve the quality. In a few years, if things go well, we could be one of the premier cattle operations in this part of Colorado. But I also want this to be a good home, a place where children can grow up healthy and happy, where there is laughter and love. That sounds wonderful, Jennifer said softly. I want that too. I want our child to have everything I had growing up, security and affection and a sense of belonging. Michael reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her smaller fingers. Our child, he repeated. I meant what I said, Jennifer. This baby is mine now in every way that matters. I will never treat it as less than my own. Jennifer squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. She had done nothing to deserve this man's goodness, this second chance, but she would spend the rest of her life being worthy of it. As the evening wore on, the reality of their new situation became apparent. They were married now, and expectations existed around that state. Jennifer felt nervous tension building as Michael banked the fire and locked the doors for the night. They climbed the stairs together, and at the landing, Michael paused. Jennifer, he said carefully, I want you to know that I am not expecting anything tonight. You are pregnant, you have had a long journey, and we barely know each other. My room is mine and yours is yours. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, you can let me know. I will not pressure you. Relief flooded through Jennifer, along with a surprising thread of disappointment. She appreciated his consideration, but part of her had been prepared to fulfill what she understood to be her wifely duties, to begin building the physical intimacy that should exist between husband and wife. Thank you, she said softly. But Michael, we are married now. I do not want you to feel you must tiptoe around me forever. I am not fragile. Michael smiled slightly. I know you are not fragile. Anyone who could travel alone from Philadelphia to Colorado while pregnant is strong as iron. But there is no rush. We have time to get to know each other, to build trust. That is more important than anything else right now. He kissed her forehead gently and retreated to his room, leaving Jennifer standing in the hallway feeling oddly bereft. She prepared for bed and slipped beneath the covers, but sleep was long in coming. She could hear Michael moving around in the next room, the creak of floorboards and the rustle of clothing. He was so close, her husband, and yet they were still strangers in so many ways. The next days fell into a rhythm as Jennifer settled into her new life. She woke early to prepare breakfast for Michael before he headed out to work the ranch. She spent her days cleaning the house, tending the vegetable garden, preparing meals, and slowly putting her own stamp on the home. Michael had kept the house clean but austere, with little decoration or warmth. Jennifer began adding small touches, curtains for the windows, wildflowers in vases, quilts she started piecing together from fabric scraps. In the evenings, Michael would return dusty and tired, and they would eat supper together while he told her about his day. Sometimes he spoke of cattle that needed veterinary attention or fences that required mending. Other times he shared observations about the land, the way the weather was shaping up, the behaviors of wildlife he had encountered. Jennifer listened avidly, learning about this new world she had entered, asking questions that Michael seemed pleased to answer. They were building something, she realized. A partnership, a friendship, a foundation for a marriage. The initial awkwardness was fading, replaced by comfortable companionship. Michael treated her with unfailing courtesy and respect, and Jennifer found herself growing genuinely fond of him. He was a good man, steady and kind, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. 3 weeks after their marriage, Jennifer woke in the night to a strange sensation. It took her a moment to identify it, and when she did, her breath caught with wonder. The baby was moving, not just the butterfly flutters she had felt before, but real, distinct movements. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the tiny life tumbling inside her, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Without thinking, she rose and padded across the hall, knocking softly on Michael's door. "Michael, are you awake?" There was rustling, and then the door opened. Michael stood there in his nightshirt, his hair rumpled, eyes wide with concern. "Jennifer, what is wrong? Are you hurt?" "No," she said quickly, reaching for his hand. "No, nothing is wrong, but the baby is moving, really moving, and I thought maybe you would like to feel it." Michael's expression shifted from concern to wonder. "May I?" he asked, his voice rough. Jennifer guided his hand to her belly, pressing it flat against the swell beneath her nightgown. They stood there in the dim hallway, barely breathing, waiting. And then it happened, a distinct kick against Michael's palm. His eyes went wide, his mouth falling open in amazement. "Did you feel it?" Jennifer whispered. "Yes," Michael breathed. "I felt it. That is incredible." He kept his hand there, feeling another movement and then another. When he looked up at Jennifer, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you for letting me be part of it." Something shifted between them in that moment, standing in the darkness with Michael's hand on her belly and life moving beneath his palm. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with physical passion, a deep, emotional connection that bound them together. Jennifer felt her heart crack open, making room for feelings she had not expected to develop so quickly. "You are going to be such a good father," she said softly. "This baby is so lucky to have you." Michael cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb stroking her cheek. "I am the lucky one," he replied. "You have given me a reason to hope again, to dream about the future. I had given up on that after Margaret died. But now, standing here feeling this new life, I feel like anything is possible." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her. This was different from the chaste kiss at their wedding. This was deeper, more meaningful, full of promise and possibility. Jennifer found herself responding, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating rapidly beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Michael rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling for you, Jennifer Ellis," he said quietly. "I know we married for practical reasons, but I need you to know that this is becoming real for me. You are not just a responsibility or a promise I made. You are becoming important to me." "I feel the same," Jennifer admitted, her voice trembling. "I did not expect this. I thought we would have a partnership, a companionable marriage. But you make me feel safe and valued and cared for in ways I have never experienced before. I am falling for you too, Michael." They stood there for another long moment, simply holding each other, and then Michael gently steered Jennifer back to her room. "Get some rest," he said. "You need your sleep." But he did not let go of her hand immediately, holding on as though reluctant to break the connection. Finally, he brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. "Good night, Jennifer." "Good night, Michael." As summer deepened into August, Jennifer's pregnancy became more pronounced, and with it came the inevitable gossip. When she accompanied Michael into town for supplies, she was aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. She held her head high, Michael's steady presence at her side giving her courage. One afternoon at the general store, a woman Jennifer had not met before approached with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mrs. Ellis, how lovely to meet you. I am Mrs. Thornton. My husband runs the bank. When are you expecting your happy arrival?" "December," Jennifer replied evenly, knowing exactly what calculation the woman was making. "How wonderful," Mrs. Thornton said, her voice dripping false sweetness. "You and Mr. Ellis must have had a very quick courtship." Before Jennifer could respond, Michael stepped up beside her, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture of possession and protection. "We met when I was in Denver on business last winter," he said smoothly, meeting the woman's gaze with calm confidence. "We corresponded for months before Jennifer agreed to come here and marry me. I consider myself the luckiest man in Colorado." The lie came out so naturally, so convincingly, that even Jennifer almost believed it. "Mrs. Thornton's smile faltered slightly, clearly disappointed that her implied accusation had been deflected. "How romantic," she said weakly, then excused herself quickly. Outside the store, Jennifer let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said to Michael. "You have nothing to thank me for," he replied firmly. "You are my wife, and that baby is mine. No one has the right to judge us or make you uncomfortable. If anyone else tries, they will answer to me." His fierce protectiveness made Jennifer's heart swell with affection. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, not caring who might see. "I love you," she said impulsively, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Michael froze, his eyes searching hers. "Jennifer," he said hoarsely, "do you mean that?" "Yes," she replied, certain now. "I love you, Michael Ellis. Not because you took me in when I was desperate, not because you are giving my baby a name, but because of who you are. Because you are kind and strong and honest. Because you make me laugh. Because you treat me like I matter. I love you." Michael pulled her into his arms right there on the main street of Ordway, holding her tight despite her growing belly between them. "I love you too," he said into her hair. "So much it scares me sometimes. I loved Margaret, but this is different. You are different. I feel like I have been waiting my whole life for you." They stood there holding each other until someone cleared their throat pointedly behind them, and they broke apart, laughing. The ride back to the ranch was filled with giddy joy, both of them talking over each other, making plans for the future, discussing names for the baby. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him after my father," Jennifer said. Thomas Ellis." "That is a fine name," Michael agreed. "And if it is a girl," I was thinking Rose, "it was my mother's middle name." Michael reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Thomas or Rose Ellis. Perfect." That night, for the first time since their marriage, Jennifer did not go to her own room. She stood in Michael's doorway, nervous but determined. "May I stay with you tonight?" she asked softly. Michael stood from where he had been sitting on the bed, removing his boots, his eyes dark with emotion. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I meant what I said before. There is no pressure." "I am sure," Jennifer replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I want to be your wife in every way, Michael. I want to share your bed, to be close to you. I love you, and I want to show you that." Michael crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her in his arms, his kiss ardent but tender, full of love and desire tempered by care. "I will be gentle," he promised. "I do not want to hurt you or the baby." "You will not," Jennifer assured him. And then there were no more words, only the quiet sounds of two people learning each other, building intimacy, consummating their marriage in the way that had been intended from the start. Afterward, lying in Michael's arms with her head on his chest, Jennifer felt complete in a way she never had before. This was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership and passion, friendship and love, all woven together into something stronger than any single strand. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered into the darkness. "After everything that happened, I thought my life was ruined, but you saved me, Michael. You gave me a future." "You saved me too," Michael replied, his hand stroking her hair. "I was just existing before, going through the motions. You have made me come alive again. You and this baby, you have given me purpose, given me a family. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Jennifer said softly. "You already do." The months passed in a blur of happiness and anticipation. Jennifer's belly grew round and full, and with Michael's help, she prepared the nursery. They painted the walls a soft yellow, built a cradle from cedar wood, sewed tiny clothes and blankets. The ranch prospered under Michael's careful management, and neighbors who had initially been suspicious of Jennifer's sudden appearance and obvious pregnancy were won over by the genuine affection between the couple. In late November, the first serious snow of the season blanketed the ranch, turning the world white and quiet. Jennifer stood at the kitchen window, watching Michael work in the barn, and felt a tightness in her belly that was different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she had been experiencing for weeks. She waited, timing the sensations, and when they came again 20 minutes later, she knew it was time. She bundled herself in a warm cloak and made her way carefully to the barn, where Michael was repairing a stall door. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile that faded when he saw her expression. "The baby?" he asked, dropping his tools immediately. "I think so," Jennifer said. "The pains are still far apart, but they are regular. We should probably get Mrs. Patterson." She said she would help with the birth. Michael moved with swift efficiency, helping Jennifer back to the house and getting her settled before saddling his fastest horse and riding hard for town. He returned within 2 hours with Mrs. Patterson and the town doctor, an elderly man named Dr. Henshaw, who had delivered half the babies in Ordway. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Michael stayed by Jennifer's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering words of encouragement even as he paled at her cries of pain. Dr. Henshaw remained calm and competent, and Mrs. Patterson proved to be an excellent midwife, firm but kind. Finally, as the winter sun climbed toward noon, Jennifer gave one last mighty push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying, lusty and strong. Dr. Henshaw held up the squalling infant, announcing, "You have a son." The doctor cleaned the baby while Mrs. Patterson tended to Jennifer, and then the tiny bundle was placed in her arms. Jennifer looked down at her son, this perfect little person with a shock of dark hair and a red, angry face, and felt her heart expand impossibly. "He is beautiful," Michael said hoarsely, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the baby. "He is perfect." Jennifer guided Michael's hand to touch their son's tiny fingers, which immediately curled around one of Michael's large digits. The sight of her husband's weathered, work-roughened hand being gripped by that impossibly small fist made Jennifer cry with joy and love and overwhelming gratitude. "Thomas," she said softly. "Thomas Michael Ellis, our son." "Our son," Michael repeated, and the wonder in his voice made it clear that he meant it with every fiber of his being. He leaned down and kissed Jennifer's forehead, then pressed the gentlest of kisses to Thomas's downy head. "I love you both so much." Dr. Henshaw examined both mother and baby, pronouncing them healthy and strong, and then he and Mrs. Patterson discreetly left the new family alone. Michael climbed carefully onto the bed beside Jennifer, and they sat together, marveling at the tiny life they had created. Though Michael had not contributed biologically, he was Thomas's father in every way that mattered. "He looks like you," Michael observed, studying the baby's features. Jennifer could see traces of the man who had fathered Thomas, but she pushed those thoughts away firmly. That man was nothing, less than nothing. The man beside her, the one gazing at Thomas with such adoration, was the baby's true father. "He has your determination," she said with a tired smile. "He fought hard to come into this world." They spent the rest of that day in a blissful cocoon, just the three of them, learning how to be a family. Michael proved surprisingly adept at handling the baby, his large hands gentle as he changed Thomas's diaper and helped Jennifer with feeding. He sang softly to the baby, old songs from his Missouri childhood, and Thomas seemed to quiet at the sound of his father's deep voice. As winter deepened, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Thomas proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping in stretches long enough that Jennifer did not become completely exhausted. Michael doted on his son, hurrying through his ranch chores so he could spend time with the baby. Jennifer would often find him in the nursery, holding Thomas against his chest, talking to the infant about the ranch, about the cattle, about all the things he would teach him as he grew. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly as a family, Michael carving a small wooden horse as Thomas's first toy. They attended church services in town, and Jennifer held her head high as curious eyes examined her and the baby. Let them look, she thought. Let them wonder. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, and a good life. The spring after Thomas's birth brought new challenges and new joys. Michael expanded the ranch, bringing in better breeding stock as he had planned, and the work required increased dramatically. Jennifer helped where she could, managing the household, tending an expanded vegetable garden, even helping with the bookkeeping as the ranch's finances grew more complex. Thomas thrived, growing chubby and alert, his dark eyes tracking his parents' movements with increasing awareness. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Thomas dozed in Michael's arms, Jennifer said, "I want to tell you something." Michael looked at her, concern flickering across his face. "What is it?" "When I came here, I was running from my past, desperate to escape the consequences of my mistakes. I thought I would spend the rest of my life being grateful to you for taking me in, feeling like I owed you an impossible debt." "Jennifer," Michael began, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. What I want you to know is that I do not feel that way anymore. Yes, I am grateful, but it is not the gratitude of someone who has been rescued. It is the gratitude of someone who has found their person, their partner, their home. I love you, Michael, not because you saved me, but because you are the best man I have ever known. Because you make me laugh and you challenge me to be better and you love our son with your whole heart. Because every single day, I look at you and think about how lucky I am." Michael's eyes were suspiciously bright as he listened. "I feel the same way," he said roughly. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I had no idea that my entire life was about to change. I thought I was taking on a burden, doing the right thing. But you have been nothing but a blessing, Jennifer. You and Thomas, you are everything to me. Everything." He shifted Thomas carefully to one arm and used his free hand to pull Jennifer close, kissing her deeply. Thomas stirred and made a small sound of protest at being squished, and they broke apart, laughing. "We should probably put him to bed," Jennifer said, standing and holding out her arms for the baby, but Michael shook his head. "I will do it. You have been with him all day. Go take a bath, relax. I want some time with my son." Jennifer kissed them both and retreated to the house, listening to Michael's voice as he carried Thomas inside, singing softly. Her heart was so full it felt like it might burst. This was happiness, she thought. Real, solid, earned happiness. The years that followed brought both triumphs and trials. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the most prosperous in the region. Michael took on a few hired hands to help with the increased workload, and the house rang with activity. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic toddler, then a curious child, always at his father's heels, wanting to help with every task. When Thomas was 3 years old, Jennifer discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was planned and celebrated, and Michael was even more attentive than he had been before. He worried constantly about Jennifer's health, remembering his first wife's death in childbirth, but Dr. Henshaw assured him that Jennifer was strong and healthy. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived on a beautiful September morning in 1886, her birth much easier than Thomas's had been. Michael cried when he held his daughter for the first time, this tiny girl with Jennifer's auburn hair and his blue eyes, an actual biological child of their union. "She is ours," he said in wonder, looking at Jennifer. "She looks like both of us." "Thomas is just as much ours," Jennifer reminded him gently, and Michael nodded quickly. "Of course he is. I did not mean it that way, I can see us in her. It is amazing." Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Michael made sure to give his son extra attention so he would not feel displaced. The family grew in love and laughter, the house that had been so quiet and lonely filling with the sounds of children playing, crying, laughing. 2 years after Rose's birth, another son arrived whom they named Samuel. Then 3 years later, another daughter, Grace. The Ellis family grew and flourished, becoming a fixture in the Ordway community. Michael served on the school board, Jennifer organized church socials, and their children grew up strong and confident, secure in the love of their parents. Thomas never knew that Michael was not his biological father. The subject simply never came up, and as the years passed, Jennifer thought about it less and less. Michael was Thomas's father in every way that mattered, teaching him to ride, to work cattle, to be a man of integrity and honor. When Thomas was 12, Michael began teaching him the business side of the ranch, preparing him to eventually take over the operation. One evening, when Thomas was 15, he said something that made Jennifer's breath catch. They were sitting at the dinner table, the whole family together, and Thomas looked at Michael with open adoration. "Papa, when I grow up, I want to be exactly like you. You are the best man I know." Michael's eyes met Jennifer's across the table, and she saw the emotion there, the pride and love and fierce paternal devotion. "You are already becoming a fine man, Thomas. I am proud to be your father." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Michael and Jennifer sat on the porch as they had so many times before, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "You ever regret it?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Taking me in, claiming Thomas as yours, all of it?" Michael turned her to face him, his eyes serious. "Never. Not for one single moment. You and the children, you are the best things that ever happened to me. That day you arrived in Ordway, that was the day my real life began. Everything before was just preparation for this, for us, for our family." "I love you so much," Jennifer said, her voice thick with emotion. "More now than I did even at the beginning, and I thought that was impossible." "Love grows," Michael said simply. "It deepens with time, with shared experiences, with working together through problems and celebrating victories. What we have now is built on years of partnership and commitment. "It is solid, Jennifer. It is forever." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, a kiss full of promise and memory, of passion that had not dimmed despite 15 years of marriage, of love that had been tested and proven true. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that time inflicts. Michael's hair went gray at the temples, and Jennifer gained laugh lines around her eyes. Their children grew and began making their own ways in the world. Thomas, at 21, took over much of the ranch's daily operations, his leadership natural and assured. He courted and married a local girl, bringing a daughter-in-law Jennifer adored into the family. Rose, at 18, announced her intention to attend the new teachers' college in Denver, wanting to follow in her mother's early footsteps. Samuel talked of becoming a veterinarian, fascinated by the animals on the ranch. Grace, still young at 13, showed talent with drawing and painting, covering pages with sketches of ranch life. As Jennifer approached her 40th birthday in 1894, she sometimes thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off a stagecoach in Ordway 12 years earlier, pregnant and desperate. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another life. The woman she had become was confident and capable, beloved wife to a good man, mother to 4 thriving children, a pillar of her community. One crisp October evening, the extended family gathered for Sunday dinner. Thomas and his wife were there with their infant son, making Michael and Jennifer grandparents. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with conversation and laughter, multiple generations sharing a meal. Jennifer looked around at the faces she loved, at the family that had sprung from that desperate gamble 12 years ago, and felt profound gratitude. Her eyes met Michael's across the table, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had greeted her on her first day in Ordway, the smile that had promised safety and home. After dinner, as the younger children ran outside to play and Thomas discussed ranch business with Michael, Jennifer slipped away to the porch. She stood watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky in shades of orange and purple, feeling the cool evening breeze on her face. Michael found her there a few minutes later, wrapping his arms around her from behind and pulling her back against his chest. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked eventually, his voice a low rumble against her back. "Everything," Jennifer replied softly. "How far we have come, how different my life is from what I expected, how blessed I am." "We are both blessed," Michael corrected gently. "You gave me back my life, Jennifer. You filled my empty house with love and laughter. You gave me children to raise, a purpose beyond just working the land. You made me whole again." Jennifer turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his weathered face in her hands. "I love you, Michael Ellis. Today, tomorrow, forever." "Forever," Michael echoed and kissed her as the stars began to emerge overhead. Inside the house, their family gathered, the sound of voices and laughter drifting out into the night. This was what they had built together, Jennifer thought. Not just a successful ranch or a comfortable home, but a legacy of love, a family founded on second chances and grace, on choosing each other every single day. The baby inside, the one Jennifer had been so frightened about, had grown into a man of honor and integrity, a devoted husband and father himself. He bore Michael's name with pride, carried forward the values his father had instilled, and never questioned his place in the family. The other children, biological products of Michael and Jennifer's love, were no more or less cherished than their eldest brother. They were all Ellis children, all loved equally and completely. As winter approached and the ranch prepared for the cold months ahead, Jennifer found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Yes, She had made a terrible mistake all those years ago, trusting the wrong man, ending up pregnant and alone. But that mistake had led her to Michael, to this life, to a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. She thought of young women in situations similar to what hers had been, desperate and afraid, and she made a quiet vow to be a source of help and support. She began working with the church to establish a small fund for women in need, and she opened her home to a young widow with children who needed temporary shelter. Michael supported her efforts completely, understanding better than most the power of a second chance. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Michael surprised Jennifer with a gift. He led her outside to the barn, where a beautiful mare stood in one of the stalls, saddled and ready to ride. "I thought you might like to learn to ride properly," Michael said, grinning at her astonished expression. "We have been married 15 years, and you still only know how to ride in a wagon. It is time I taught you." They rode out together that afternoon, Michael patient and encouraging as Jennifer learned to control the horse. They rode to the top of a hill overlooking the ranch, and Michael helped Jennifer dismount, holding her steady until she found her footing. "Look," he said, turning her to face the vista spread below. "Look at everything we have built." Jennifer saw the ranch house, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. She saw the barns and corrals, the cattle grazing peacefully, the fields that would be planted come spring. She saw the life they had created together, solid and prosperous and full of love. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "You are beautiful," Michael replied, turning her to face him. "After 15 years, 4 children, and all the challenges we have faced, you are more beautiful to me now than the day we married. You have made every day of these 15 years a gift, Jennifer. I love you more than words can express." Jennifer reached up and pulled him down for a kiss, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she said, "Here is to 15 more years, and 15 after that, and however many more God grants us." "However many more," Michael agreed, and they stood together on that hill, the wind whipping around them, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The seasons turned, year following year, and the Ellis family continued to grow and thrive. There were challenges, of course. A drought one year that threatened the cattle, an injury that laid Michael up for weeks, a fever that swept through the younger children, terrifying Jennifer until it finally broke. But they faced everything together, their love and partnership seeing them through. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as Michael began to slow down in his 50s. Samuel did indeed become a veterinarian, attending school in Denver, and then returning to Ordway to establish a practice. Rose taught at the local school, her intelligence and compassion making her a beloved figure to her students. Grace married a young artist who moved to Ordway to be near her family, and they built a small studio where Grace could pursue her painting. By the time Michael and Jennifer celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1907, they were the proud grandparents of 8 grandchildren, with more on the way. Their house was always full of family, multiple generations gathering for meals and holidays. The love that Michael and Jennifer had planted years ago bearing abundant fruit. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching yet another spectacular sunset, Michael said, "Do you remember that first night when you knocked on my door to tell me the baby was moving?" "Of course," Jennifer replied, smiling at the memory. "You were so amazed, so gentle." "That was the moment I knew," Michael said quietly. "That was when I realized I was not just doing the right thing, I was falling in love. Feeling that baby move, seeing your face, sharing that moment with you, it changed everything. For me, it was when you told Mrs. "Thornton that we met in Denver," Jennifer said. "The way you stood up for me, protected me from gossip without a moment's hesitation. That was when I knew you were truly mine, that you were claiming me and Thomas as your own." Michael took her hand, their fingers lacing together with the ease of decades of practice. "Best decision I ever made," he said simply. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars emerged, the sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounding them. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter playing the piano, her clear voice singing a hymn Jennifer had taught her. "We have had a good life," Jennifer said softly. "The best life," Michael corrected. "And it is not over yet. We have years ahead of us still, more grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch together." "Promise?" Jennifer asked, even though she knew that time made no guarantees. "Promise," Michael replied, pulling her close. "However long God grants us, we will spend it together, just like we have from the beginning. You and me, building our life one day at a time." Jennifer rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had arrived in Ordway frightened, pregnant, desperate, certain her life was ruined. Instead, she had found everything she had never known to hope for: a partner who cherished her, children who thrived, a community where she belonged, and a love that had grown stronger with every passing year. The mail-order bride who had arrived pregnant with another man's child had become Jennifer Ellis, beloved wife, devoted mother, proud grandmother, and pillar of the Ordway community. And the rancher who had looked at her swollen belly and said, "It's mine now," had proven those words true every single day since, loving Thomas and all their children with a father's complete devotion. As they sat together on that porch, surrounded by the life they had built, both knew that this was what love looked like. Not perfect, not simple, but real and lasting and true. A love that had survived scandal and hardship, that had grown through years of partnership and commitment, that had created a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. The years continued their steady march, bringing both joy and sorrow, as is the way of life. Michael's mother, who had never approved of his second marriage, passed away, and Michael made peace with her memory. Jennifer's old friend from Philadelphia tracked her down years later, and they renewed their correspondence, allowing Jennifer to share the happiness she had found. When Michael turned 60, the family threw a huge celebration at the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around. It was a testament to the respect and affection the Ellis family had earned over the decades, the way they had built not just a successful ranch but real community ties. Speeches were made praising Michael's integrity, his hard work, his devotion to family. Jennifer watched with pride as her husband was honored, this man who had taken a chance on a desperate stranger and built a beautiful life with her. Thomas stood to speak, his voice strong and sure, a successful rancher himself now with a growing family. "My father taught me everything I know about being a man," he said, looking directly at Michael. "He taught me integrity, hard work, devotion to family. He taught me that love is not just words but actions, choosing your people every single day. He taught me that family is not just about blood, but about commitment and care. I am the man I am today because of him, and I am grateful every day that he is my father." Michael had tears streaming down his face as Thomas spoke, and Jennifer squeezed his hand tightly. This was the moment when everything came full circle, when the gamble they had taken decades ago was proven absolutely, completely worth it. Thomas knew he was loved, knew he belonged, knew he was an Ellis in every way that mattered. And Michael knew his love and devotion had made that possible. As the sun set on that celebration, casting golden light over the gathered crowd, Jennifer looked around at the community they had built, the family they had raised, the love that had grown from such unlikely beginnings. She thought about that frightened girl on the stagecoach, about the kind rancher who had offered her a second chance, about the baby who had been born into loving arms despite his complicated origins. Every choice they had made, every challenge they had faced, every moment of joy and sorrow had led them here, to this perfect evening surrounded by love. It was more than she had ever dared to dream, more than she had thought possible during those dark days when her future had seemed so bleak. That night, lying in bed beside Michael as they had for decades now, Jennifer said, "Thank you." "For what?" Michael asked, rolling to face her, his eyes still bright despite his age. "For everything. For taking a chance on me, for loving Thomas as your own. For building this beautiful life with me. For proving every single day that love is a choice and choosing me over and over again." Michael cupped her face tenderly, his thumb stroking her cheek. "You made it easy to choose you, Jennifer. From the very beginning, you have been my partner, my love, my everything. These decades with you have been the greatest blessing of my life." They kissed then, slow and sweet, a kiss that held decades of love and partnership, of passion that had evolved but never faded, of commitment that had weathered every storm. Outside their window, the Colorado night was vast and starry, the land they loved stretching out in every direction. Inside, they held each other close, two souls who had found each other against all odds and created something that would last beyond their own lifetimes. The Ellis legacy would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the values they had instilled and the love they had modeled. Thomas would pass the ranch to his own children, along with the lessons his father had taught him. Rose would influence countless students with her dedication to education. Samuel would heal animals and touch lives through his compassionate veterinary practice. Grace's art would capture the beauty of the West for future generations. But more than any individual achievement, the real legacy was love. The kind of love that offers second chances, that claims another's child as your own, that chooses partnership over perfection, that builds slowly and surely over decades of shared life. That was what Michael and Jennifer had created, and it would ripple outward through generations, touching lives they would never know. As Jennifer drifted off to sleep in Michael's arms, secure and loved, she thought once more about that terrified girl on the stagecoach. If she could go back and tell her younger self anything, it would be this: trust the kindness of strangers, believe in second chances, and know that sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the greatest blessings. Because the rancher who said, "It's mine now," was not just claiming a child, he was claiming a whole future, a family, a love that would define both their lives. And in the end, that made all the difference.